Welcome to episode 405 of the Barcelona podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Dan Hilton. He's Rafa Aldamuy. And you know, Rafa, I think my voice and general physical state kind of match the tone of this show, but very much like the result, we will get through it. And I have to ask you, how you doing?
I'm hanging on. Once again, we're going through a very rough patch, but honestly, it's worrisome that it's starting to feel familiar. So, although I am sad and mad a little bit, it's just I'm not surprised. Honestly, sadly, I saw it coming, and because obviously it wasn't up to us. Even defeating Bayern, regardless of what happened in our game, we already knew that we were going down to the Europa League. So,
well, I didn't realize you were talking about Barcelona. I literally thought you were talking about my cold and this awful vacation. I'm trying my best not to throw my nephews under the bus, but kids have illnesses, and so the minute you talk to one, you know that they're. But I had a wonderful vacation. I want to thank everyone as well. As I said, I've already been back for a show this week, but for the last week, I was away. Was able to get some nice relaxation. It was really nice that Barca went out and destroyed Villarreal while I was on vacation. So that was the only time I had to unplug. So it was nice to do that. I would have hated to have to unplug for Bayern Munich and then plug back in to a vacation or whatever that iteration goes. So I'm going to try my best not to cough my way through this. If I do, that's why it's going to be disjointed. But likely, if there's some weird thing where Rafa's talking and then all of a sudden he's talking about a different thing, it's because I went through a coughing fit. But we're going to start with where you began, Rafa, and that is the fact that how Barcelona were already out of the Champions League affected yesterday, and it affects the entire narrative here because, I feel like I would love to talk about the game individually, but also who cares and who, by the time that match started, who gave a flying fart how that ended. Because Bayern Munich, 16 goals to 2 goals over their last, 9 matchups. Barcelona hasn't beaten Bayern Munich, twice in their entire history, and they've lost almost double-digit times. So it's they cannot get over Bayern Munich. And not to say you're accepting of the L of the loss, because I didn't do that. I said, hey, Barcelona could go out there and do something about it. But once again, Barca faced down the mighty Bayern Munich, and they proved, that being Barcelona, that I don't think it mattered who Xavi put out there. Barcelona, at this moment, the way they're constructed, be it the lineup, be it Xavi's tactics, there's a lot of things that we're going to talk about. They're just not as good as Bayern Munich. They're feet behind, their legs behind. So as inflammatory as it might be about talking about 90 minutes, Barcelona are already out of the Champions League. The damage is already done because of injuries, VAR, decisions by Xavi. And there's, just where do you put, and that's not really exactly the percentages, but there certainly is different pots where you put why Barca aren't in the Champions League anymore. And, because of the money that was spent, that's another big thing. I'm basically speaking about our outline today, because that's what we're going to have to talk about. Talking about financially the big picture. We have to talk about what this means for the summer transfer and the January transfer windows, about the construction of the squad, who needs to stay, who needs to go in the big picture, how Xavi navigates the rest of this year. And so I think where we should start, Rafa, is probably just talking about not that Barca are out of the Champions League before this match started, but the fact that in this match, they clearly weren't as good as Bayern Munich. And when you were watching this match, how do you diagnose that? What in this match did you see that said,
the thing
Barca
is,
behind?
I'll say this. There's some games that I think Xavi gets it right, and I think there's some games that Xavi gets it wrong. In Germany, we were by far the better team, and it was just one of those games that we were unlucky in the sense down to us because we didn't put our chances away, and then the few that Bayern had, they put theirs away. Even Leroy Sané said it after that game. Nagelsmann said it after Wednesday. He said, in Germany, we were a little bit lucky, but tonight, obviously, we were the better team. So, that being said, the same way I could say Xavi got it right in Germany, and I think it was down to the players why we didn't win. This time around, I think the reason we lost was because of Xavi. I think tactically, to me, although I do agree that Bayern are a better team, you can't. To me, it just bothers me how we go to Germany with a plan. We outplay them for the most of that game. We have so many good chances to put that game away and win in freaking Germany at the Allianz, and then they come to the Camp Nou and we just get rolled over. We don't look competitive at all until, in my opinion, minute 60-ish, when Xavi, quote-unquote, decided to go forward, took out Busquets, put in forwards and whatnot, because to me, it just looked like we were scared. Like, like playing with Pedri as a false winger, that worked against Athletic Club and Valverde and whatnot. But against Bayern, we just didn't have any threat up top. So you notice Bayern were like, oh, we know you don't got speed with Pedri. You don't got speed with Lewandowski. The only way you can do any danger is with Dembele, and boy, did he turn Alphonso Davies around in that first half. But they knew that. So they were just able to push forward, press up high, and Upamecano and the league didn't have to worry whatsoever behind them because we had no threat to take advantage of those spaces. So that enabled them to literally put their high line and suffocate us, and we couldn't play out from the back. And to me, that's down to Xavi. He read it wrong, and that showed on the pitch. So at the end of the day, that's to me, I'll just say this. To me, this, not the loss itself, but how we looked, how below Bayern Munich we looked, besides like Dembele and Balde, I think this is just down to Xavi 100%. And it is growing pains, because we might analyze players, oh, they're just getting to Barcelona, they're young players, Gavi, Valde, Pedri, whoever that might be. But Xavi is also learning as he goes. He doesn't have, Al-Sad, wherever he was, to me, that's not experience at the high level. So he's learning on the fly as well. And we're seeing this throughout the entire season, that there's some games that he completely gets it right, and then there's some games that he completely gets it wrong. So to me, it pains me to say this because I do love Xavi, but this to me, it's all down to him.
Well, yeah, I think the big disparity between the two teams was the press, kind of as you were alluding to. Barcelona's press was disjointed at best, and there were a number of times, every goal, it was because Balde was pushing forward the way that he was. It was a 3v3 with Jules Koundé and Bellerin and Marcos Alonso against Bayern's forwards coming through, and while that front three was, Thomas Muller didn't even start the match. So it's not to say that, he came on afterwards. So it's not that he was that terrifying, but yeah, when you have ECM and you have Mane and you have Gnabry with Musiala in behind, and you basically create those 4-on-3s, that being Bayern Munich did. And it took one pass. And as much as, it did take a little bit of a rewatch to kind of diagnose that and almost get to the bottom of it, if you will, where, Bellerin, A, out of form, B, even in form, not that great defensively, has also lost some speed as well. So putting him one against Sadio Mane, 1v1, not to say zero blame on Bellerin, but Bellerin is who he is, and I don't blame him for getting undressed by Sadio Mane, because that's going to happen 9.5 times out of 10, right? Only once does Bellerin get fortunate with that. On the second goal, there was a moment when Marcos Alonso stepped forward and jumped forward to try to make this tackle when Balde was caught upfield, and then it left space in behind, that being Balde's left flank, that Bayern Munich just exploited, and there goes ECM and just scores through the legs of Ter Stegen. And at that point, I'm like, why did Alonso do that, right? Is that an instruction from Xavi, or was it something more? Well, looking back at the first goal, Koundé did the exact same thing. So it's not a matter of Alonso did poorly because Alonso stinks and Koundé does the right thing. So Koundé actually made the exact same quote-unquote mistake, or was that the instruction from Xavi, right? Because it's either an individual mistake or it's Xavi got his tactics wrong. One of the other reasons for that being a problem was on both those goals, it wasn't even Alonso and Koundé who had stepped that made the issue. It's that why were those two having to make that last-ditch tackle at midfield, because Barcelona playing a high line themselves. And yes, Bellerin did keep in both goals. If he had stepped forward, then those goals aren't scored and those are offsides. So, truly, one step by Bellerin is the difference there. However, on that press, especially with Pedri on the wing, and I don't know if this was the problem here, it may have been that Pedri was unfamiliar with his pressing duties and his spacing, But on, I believe, is the second goal. He and De Jong, it was the one that started from the dead ball situation. He and De Jong are 15 yards from each other, and both of them are closer to the man on the dead ball than they are to the man behind in the midfield, right? So you put Busquets in a 2v1 situation, and Busquets cannot at this point handle a 1v1 situation, let alone a 2v1. So that's why that one ball from the dead ball situation was able to bypass Barcelona. And that was the other thing, and the other reason why Balde was pressing high on that side, because Balde had stepped to try to press. Because when Barcelona are in their man-to-man press like that, if you don't have a man, or if somebody doesn't have a man, again, personnel-wise, you don't have the ability to put out any fires. Because then again, Busquets in a 1v1 is awful. Bellerin, Alonso, like you have people that cannot function in 1v1 situations. So it's, for me, it was two things that really like outclassed Barcelona. It's that one, you're correct that I think Xavi, especially with his press dealing with Bayern Munich, totally got it wrong. That's one. But part two, even if he had changed personnel or even if he had got it slightly right, Bayern Munich are still going to take advantage of Barca because their players are just better than Barcelona's players. They're more informed. Like even in build-up, like I know we were saying that it just seemed to be like Dembele, but Bellerin, I thought he gave a pretty good effort offensively. It's just like his passes were behind teammates or in front of teammates. All his wall passes were off by a few yards. Like it just seemed like he had not practiced or played much with his teammates because he hadn't. He played less 150 minutes going into that match. So it's like to ask a team that is not good enough anyway to not have any continuity and then throw them out there together against a well-oiled machine as Bayern Munich. Like the result is exactly what we thought it was. Same thing with Kessié. Like Kessié had good moments, but also like it continued to be an issue with he and Busquets and De Jong. Like they were not anywhere near each other. And I don't think that was even on purpose. I think that they were just kind of trying to do their own thing and write their own script. And that just can't happen against Bayern Munich. Like against Bayern, you have to overload the midfield, keep your midfielders tight, and then build out through the wings and then build back through the middle. And they just didn't do that.
I want to thank OneFootball for sponsoring this video. OneFootball is the app that I use to stay up to date on everything FC Barcelona. But more importantly, because you know I'm watching every minute of Barcelona action, it does help me stay up to date with all the teams that Aldamuy might be scouting and looking at players for the next big transfer window. With a custom-tailored homepage, stay up to date with breaking news, live scores, and even transfer news. While on the go, you can check with matches in live time and watch those La Liga highlights afterwards. And especially if you're in a place defending the good name of La Liga against other teams. Say in the UK and Ireland, you can watch La Liga highlights on the go and let them know that it's not just Real Madrid and Barcelona, regardless of what the table says. So use a link down in the description below for a free download of the OneFootball app on Android or iOS to put all your football in one place. And they also help out a tiny Barca channel like this one too. Thanks again to OneFootball. Now back to all things FC Barcelona.
Yeah, and with Xavi, and what's disappointing me a lot from Xavi is that he can talk a big game in the press conference at how he wants or likes to play. Oh, this like the third man, the square, and this. I'm trying to like translate that from Spanish to English as well as I can. But he's talking about all these like technical, elaborate stuff, and then when you actually see Barcelona play, you're like, dude, we don't play like that whatsoever. And then, for example, like I'm not, like, as you all know, I'm not the biggest fan of Eric Garcia whatsoever. But to me, it's mind-puzzling that you decide to go with Marcos Alonso as a center back ahead of Eric Garcia. I don't like Eric. I think he should play the least amount of minutes. But in this exact situation, if Marcos Alonso is barely good as a wing back or a left back, as a center back, he's horrible. He has no idea tactically what he's doing. Like, there were so many times that he was just running back, looking literally like at Ter Stegen without like realizing who was like on his left, on his right, behind him. He was just like, F this, I'm just running back and then I'll just reassess and see what's going on. Like, Marcos Alonso is horrible as a center back. Then at the same time, like, it's just sad to watch Busquets just like from now to, let's go back a few years. If we don't play a certain way, which for whatever reason, you might think we don't play the way we should, we just don't. So he is more of a detriment than anything else. Like I think you said in one of your match reviews a few a few days ago. I think it might have been after the Clásico. He just he doesn't compensate enough. Like before, it was like, oh, offensively, he just gives you so much and whatnot. Right now, offensively, he doesn't give you that plus to counter all the minus that he gives you during a game. So at the end of the day, like Busquets, if we are not going to control the game, which we more often than not in big games against quality teams, we just don't. It's the ugly truth. Whether we don't have the right players, whether Xavi's hasn't been capable of just teaching them. Because that's another thing that I see with Xavi, and it's worrying me. And I saw this a lot in college. I don't know if it happened to you. I had a lot of professors that were geniuses in that like specific topic. Let's say math. A physics teacher. He knew everything about physics and whatnot, but he just didn't have the talent of explaining that to his to everyone else. And that's not something easy to do. You might like Xavi, obviously he knows everything, but right now I don't think he's been able to teach the entire team how he wants to play, because we're playing more often than not the way I know Xavi wants to play. Therefore, if we don't play that way, we suffer because we don't have the personnel to defend running back to our goal, because it happened in the Clásico. If you're not going to control the game and you're going to lose dumb passes and whatnot, then you're going to be really, really in a bad state trying to defend a counterattack against freaking Valverde, Vinicius, Tchouaméni, Benzema, and company. Same thing against the Bayern Munich. Like, if we're going to play with Bellerin, who, like you said, has definitely lost a step because of that ACL injury, isn't match fit whatsoever, just got to Barcelona, so he's still like trying to learn everything back. He's played almost his entire adult career in the Premier League. You got Marcos Alonso, who's slow as hell, who is playing as a center back. Then you got Busquets, who again is at the end of his career, slow, can barely stop anyone 1v1, let alone 2v1. You got Pedri playing as a false left winger. It's just a mess. And it showed against a Bayern Munich side that knew everything that they had to do. Like, it wasn't that, in my opinion, obviously Nagelsmann got everything right. But even individually, they just, like, even, let's say, Musiala. There were times where Musiala knew exactly who was besides him. Let's say it was Busquets. Musiala knew he didn't have to do anything fancy. He just sprinted towards one way, and he was able to lose Busquets out of sight. Like, it was just little things like that were like, dude, they're not even like doing anything like a genius tactic. Like, that's all, in all fairness, they were playing with freaking Eric Choupo-Moting. Like, with all due respect, like, they were playing with Ulreich. Neuer wasn't playing. We weren't able to get a freaking shot on target.
Yeah. I mean, I think that does say something. Well, that last point, it's hard to refute that one. But as far as Barcelona's personnel, it kind of makes me think about the big pictures, the big questions that are especially being asked internally at the club, and what that means for the rest of this season, including what the discussion or how this club is going to go forward throughout the World Cup. In that, for Barcelona's goals this season, right now the Champions League is gone, dead, and buried. There's Copa del Rey, there's the Liga, and there's Europa League, and there's a Supercopa, right? And the goal for Xavi Hernandez, because, as I said, I mean, you and I have talked about before, no one's screaming Xavi out. Like, we're holding him accountable. We're putting blame on him. But, I mean, nobody's beginning. This project is still in its infancy, truly. I mean, he's been there for 11 months. So talk to me after 2 years, really. But the hot seat is going to get a lot hotter, and the pressure is going to build on Xavi if he can't win one of those 4 trophies I just talked about. I mean, Barcelona do desperately need to win a trophy this season to validate the summer. And that's going to be a big question throughout the rest of this season, that Barcelona are not good enough against these top opponents. Inter, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, whoever it may be, right? And even in the Europa League, they might face an informed Arsenal side that is going to look better than Barca, the way that Barca constructed. But the rest of their Liga matches, as they've already proven in the league, like, Barcelona is good enough. Like, they're a tier 2 team right now. And so they're good enough to challenge for the Liga trophy. And they might lose it at the end to Real Madrid, but Real also could drop some points like they are capable of doing. So Barca may be in that fight. They could be in the Europa League fight, depending on the draw. They could be they should be in the Supercopa fight. And they're always in the Copa del Rey fight because that's the one trophy they seem to know how to win. And for Barcelona, it's interesting because we can all agree, and the comments about Sergio Busquets kind of taking some things personally, and even Xavi's comments after kind of hint to you that Piqué, Alba, Busquets, like they know that the club was saying, hey, I think your time is over. And they were saying that last summer, and those guys were like, we're making a buttload of money. Our time is still not over, right? But now that they get to physically see, and it's hard to watch Busquets get booed too at the Spotify Camp Nou, because again, the guy's a legend, but he's a legend who didn't know when to leave. And that's always a problem with the legends. If you don't know when to go, you're going to get booed. That's what happens. And so moving forward this season, like I know that we're going to see Busquets more than people want, but the same thing when Piqué was needed, and I don't think he will be because Christensen's supposed to come back against Valencia, and you hope that between Christensen and Araujo that you don't see Piqué's face anymore this season, maybe in the Copa del Rey. And for Jordi Alba, like not to say Jordi Alba's done something wrong this season the way Busquets and Piqué have, but you could also see the way that Xavi is using Marcos Alonso and the fact that Balde, even against Bayern Munich, is the starter at Barcelona at the left back position. So other than like Jordi Alba getting the rare game, like those are not his minutes. He'll just get some pity minutes here and then. So between those three, I mean, it's rumored that one of the two, that being Piqué or Alba, might choose to leave in January. I don't see that happening with what they're making. But as far as like what drastic changes are going to happen to the squad this season or even in January, I don't see anything big happening. Like this is the squad this season, right? And then the club, because that's the next topic we have to get into about the finances, what this means. Next season, the club will have to change out, 7 players, right? You're talking about 5 to 7, not even new transfers. You're talking maybe 4 more free transfers, like the likes of the Alonsos and the Bellerin. Sorry. I mean, hopefully you get more Christensen and Kessié types, but Kessié hasn't really proven it yet either. So your free transfers, expect that to be the route, like Inigo Martinez, like when that kind of rumor pops up, a Spanish left-footed center back who is on a free transfer, like, yeah, of course, let's circle that 1 billion times over because those rumors are real. And so obviously believe those kind of things. But as far as multiple players, especially when you talk about Busquets' replacement, multiple players who might be more than 50 million euros again, like that's crazy. Like you can't talk that way anymore. And the fact that the club, as I said, they didn't have the money last summer, and we're going to hear a lot of it from a lot of critics talking about the levers and the fact that Barcelona mortgages their future. And I always want to remind people that the truth financially is somewhere in the middle. That, like Laporta say, Barcelona is not fine. And, whenever you hear Eduardo Romero, like, he's the one who's saying the truth. Like, the VP, like, the vice president of finances, like, he's the one who you have to believe. Whereas, like, we could use that Champions League money. Like, yeah, that's true. But I have also heard that it's 12 million euros or 13 million euros are going to miss out on by not making, I think it was all the way to the semifinal, or they budgeted for the quarterfinal of the Champions League, which is 13 million euros that they're going to miss out on. But the big worry about Barcelona is that when Barca don't win trophies and they do fail, there's a lot less gate revenue, as I've said, and gate revenue is so important to this team. It's brand recognition. It's people signing up for Barca TV, which actually doesn't do much, but it's people signing up and merchandise and all those things, and the portion of merchandise that Barca does get, and also sponsors like the Spotify deal. If you try to renegotiate that, I mean, obviously they just signed it, but let's say they tried to sign it next season, it'd be a lot harder to sign a new shirt sponsor, right? If Spotify decides to walk and take some kind of out, like whatever deal that they get is going to be less than they had last year because they also last year were in the Europa League. So you're going to, in marketing and pulling in sponsors is a lot harder to get. And those sums add up. And that's why you're going to continue to hear the Super League stuff. And that's what's so cynical because the Super League conversation, I'm not saying it's pro or con. I'm saying that because that Super League conversation, it does ruin the integrity of the sporting of it. It does ruin the integrity of the UEFA Champions League. But in the same regard, like, the UEFA Champions League is not the Champions League itself, but UEFA is completely corrupt. Like it's nonsense in particular. And again, that broadcast money brought in by the Premier League because La Liga cannot compete and Javier Tebas does nothing to help Spain compete. That's why you have one Spanish club in the knockout rounds of the Champions League, right? So there's a problem with Spanish football that it seems like Real Madrid and Barca and Atletico Madrid have taken upon themselves to say, hey, if the league isn't going to fix this and we're going to fix this and we're going to look like we've got egg on our face, but hopefully there's enough people that forgive us that we keep up our brand and we are able to compete financially. And that's the next step for Barcelona, is how they fight for their own brand recognition while being almost put in this little box of a failure team. Like as Kevin Williams said, and this is going to be the title of the podcast, it's a legacy of failure. From Sender Rizal to Bartomeu, like financially, Barcelona failed. Financially, they had two presidents that absolutely failed the club. And now on the field, you are seeing between Roma and Bayern and Liverpool, and right? Like you are seeing now a legacy of failure with the same legends face after face after face. Like I have to put the last story for you, Rafa. So when I'm going to do my JPEGs for the YouTube or whatever, and I'm trying to find stuff from the past even, I'll like when I name them and I find the images, I'll put it like PK disappointed or Barca disappointed. So all I did was I put into my hard drive PK _ disappointed. And do you know how many images popped up? The answer is too many. Too many images pop up when I put Ter Stegen disappointed. I have too many images to show you from the last few seasons of our players looking mopey and sad after a bad result that meant a cataclysmic podcast for you and I a few days after.
No, I mean, I agree with almost everything you said. And as far as like the January transfer window, the only reason I think we might see some activity is because I was reading, whether that's true or not, but that the board is afraid that during the summer they might not be able to abide by the 1-by-1 rule salary wise. It could go back up to like the 1-by-3, 1-by-4. So that's why we might see more a January transfer window more agitated than we might have had if we hadn't gone out of the Champions League, because they're like, well, we don't know what's going to happen during the summer. So if we do have the 1-by-1 rule right now, so we got to reinforce the team now because we don't know if we're going to be able to abide by that during the summer.
I just want to jump in there and say that like the wages 10 times more important. And that's what like all these Twitter pundits that aren't following Barcelona, they just do not seem to grasp that Barcelona, as hard as it may be, like you may say Frankie de Jong, they solved their own problem because he's going to be the future Busquets, but no, like Barcelona still desperately need to get rid of Frankie de Jong's wages, because if they had made the quarterfinal of the Champions League, Frankie de Jong's salary is 3 times that, but they have to budget for Frankie's salary because you can't push him out. But if they find a way to convince him to leave, or if Man United or some other team offers him a big enough package and he goes, that does rectify the issues with the with not making this round of the Champions League, right? So that's what we're talking about, and that's why
it's like Frankie, and also like with Spanish, like the vaca, like the sacred cows, like Busquets, Piqué, and Jordi Alba.
Oh, yeah.
I was just reading today on Mundo Deportivo that even if you buy them out for the salary cap, their salary still counts, even though you bought them out. So they were like, if we're going to buy them out and it's still going to count against the salary cap, we might as well have them here physically. So it's just also one of those things that apparently like not only Laporta and Barcelona, but a bunch of like other La Liga teams like want Tebas to take that out, because they're like, dude, like we're paying them to leave. Why are you punishing us salary cap wise? Because then it doesn't make any sense. Like we're being penalized 2 times instead of just 1. That doesn't make any sense. So obviously the Barcelona's relationship with Tebas isn't the greatest right now. But like,
I want to throw that in too. It's Villarreal, it's Real Betis, it was Mallorca, it's Almeria. Like there's a number of teams that are dealing with that rule, right? And so my argument is always, if a third or half of the teams in your league are annoyed by something, right? Like take Barca and Real Madrid out of it, because of course they want what's best for them. And so that rule's in there so that those guys don't just make mistakes in the transfer window and then pay off players and get to repeat the same mistake in short order. Because, I mean, again, that empowers Real Madrid to do more of that. True. But I think it's better for Spanish football in totality to get rid of that rule.
No, I completely agree. And then, again, salaries are what they are, especially not the good ones. I would say that obviously Lewandowski's salary, like nobody's complaining about that when he's banging 15 goals, 16 goals, 17 goals, whatever he has scored so far.
No, but he is making 37 million when he's 37 years old, or whatever it is. He's like
true, and that reminds me, like again, it all comes down to performance, because if he's still playing like right now, I don't think anybody's gonna quote unquote be bothered by what he's earning as long as he's providing all those goals. Obviously, that remains to be seen. But then when you have a salary
matches though, like
what was that?
Next year, the year after, like he has to score in one of these quote unquote big matches. Like he needs to get an El Clasico goal. He has to score a big goal against the team that you're fighting for the group for next year. Or second.
He does. I completely agree. He does. But in his defense, a little bit, the only game that I think I can't defend him is the one against Bayern in Germany because he did have chances and he just missed them, which was very weird to watch because you would think he would put those away. But in the rest of the matches, like the games against Inter, the game against Real Madrid, the game against Bayern, I think it's just more down to a collective issue in Xavi because he's just getting bullied by 2 or 3 defenders. It happened in the 2 games against Inter. He was basically playing against 3 center backs. It happened Wednesday, like Upamecano and De Ligt were literally eating his ankles. He had no time whatsoever to do absolutely anything. And then against Real Madrid, it was basically the same. They were like, Lewandowski's not going to beat us. We're going to have everybody near Lewandowski. And then if your wing players can do anything, then hats off to you. But Lewandowski's not beating us. So although I do agree he needs to score, and I think he was robbed of a penalty. To me, that rule is dumb as hell because it doesn't matter if you get the ball like a smidge, if you then tackle the attacking player that's going to be able to get to that ball. So whether that's not a rule. Like people, that's like an urban myth. Like, oh no, he got the ball. Like the rule book doesn't say that if you get the ball a little bit, then you're able to just tackle the player. No, that's not a rule in football. It just kept getting repeated and people just assumed. So that's why I was like so surprised. Like the league did get a smidge of the ball, but then he just tackled Lewandowski. So that's just crazy. So at the end of the day, I do agree with Lewandowski. He needs to score in a big game, but I think that's more down to how we're not getting him the ball in good enough situations. Like I would say, I don't know his expected goals in any of these big names that he's been defended by 2 or 3 center backs, but I would imagine that it's really, really low. And then going back to the salary, I know we got a little bit like sidetracked with that, but the worry thing, the bad thing is the big salaries on the sacred cows, like Busquets, Piqué, Jordi Alba, obviously Frenkie de Jong also, but Ter Stegen as well. But right now, like Ter Stegen, obviously couldn't do anything for the most part in this game, but we're seeing hopefully like he's quote unquote back to prime Ter Stegen. So if he's playing like prime Ter Stegen, then you're like, whatever, that's a good amount of money to be had for him. But at the end of the day, it's just those 3 sacred cows. And then I know I may sound like a Frenkie apologist, and I do agree that what he's earning doesn't go with what he's offering in the field. What he earns, he should play like a super mega star, and he isn't playing like one. But I think he's playing well. Just obviously his salary doesn't match. Like it's not proportionate. But at the end of the day, it's a problem that Barcelona, in a way, the same thing with the 3 sacred cows. You're tied. You can't do anything unless they want to or are able, or they want to help, because if not, you can't force them. You can't trade them. This is not the NBA, and you can't force them to lower their salary. And at the worst case, you can't cut their salaries because it doesn't do anything for the salary cap. So it's frustrating. We can't do anything then. Like,
yeah,
we got to get our we got to process that. We can't do anything.
Yeah, and I think, as I'm kind of reiterating this point, that when you talk about sacred cows, you're talking about obviously Busquets and Piqué and Alba. But moving forward, again, with De Jong and his number, that becomes one of the big issues, I think, moving forward this season. Because if De Jong is necessary because they didn't make the knockout of the Champions League, if he is financially necessary to kind of almost be shown the door or attempt to show him the door for the second time, do you really want to put the hard work in having him play as the pivot moving forward? Like, is Barcelona better for the rest of this season with De Jong as a pivot? Or as we keep kind of saying, would it behoove Barcelona a little bit better to continue to play the way that they're playing and kind of break down oppositions? Because even looking against Bayern Munich, and I know this sounds entirely insane, but if Dembele wasn't so hot and cold, or if he wasn't so cold in his final ball as he was hot in the buildup, because Xavi's plan, moving forward wasn't that awful in terms of, even Pedri on that wing, like Pedri would come in against Bayern Munich and create these numerical advantages on the strong side, being Balde's side, right, where De Jong was also set up. And Barcelona would have these long switches out to Dembele, the way that they did when Xavi first arrived. And it was working generally to almost good effect. The problem was that there were no shots on goal. Like the final ball was not coming. Barcelona were so putrid in their completions in the final third yesterday that nothing ever went on net, right? And so Barcelona with possession, as has been the case in the Liga, they've been good, and it's worked, and it's made sense, whether that's Busquets or not, right? Busquets' availability be damned, or even without Eric Garcia, without Araujo, without whoever it may be, right? Because Araujo coming back in possession creates a problem that we've almost forgotten, right? Like every other center back is actually better in build-up than Ronald Araujo is, and so that's going to be this issue that's going to rear its ugly head again, unless while he's been on the shelf, he's kind of figured that out, which I can't imagine happening. So Barcelona in possession, in build-up against teams that are fine, it makes sense, because even the way Bayern was playing and pressing Barca, it wasn't that dissimilar to Athletic Club. Like they were allowing the two center backs to be open, and they were putting pressure on the wingers. I mean, that being the wing backs or the full backs, if you will. And then they were pressuring the middle of the field. That's exactly what the Athletic Club were doing, that Bayern were doing, except Bayern is Bayern, so they're faster, they're quicker to the ball, and if anything, because, no offense to the referees in the Liga, the tactical fouls yesterday by Bayern Munich was a huge part of that game. If you said that Barcelona were playing scared, but if anything, Bayern Munich were the team that were kicking the living daylights out of Barcelona, because every time Barcelona created anything, it would end in delict or Upamecano. That's why Bayern Munich were picking up so many yellow cards, because Bayern and Nagelsmann were willing to say, hey, instead of letting Barca find any flow, any rhythm in this game at home with these 85,000 people screaming, let's just shut this thing down, because this team can't pick the ball up after we've knocked it out of their hands, right? It's like that bully where you're running with the ball, and again, maybe it's just because I was a tiny kid, but some big kid comes over and he smacks to the ground. You pick it back up and you keep running with it. They smack it again. You pick it back up. But Barcelona has a hard time, maybe it's because they're so old and their backs are given out already, that they have a hard time reaching down, and you know what I mean? They got a crick in their back as they're trying to pick the ball up. And that continues to be the theme with Barcelona, that if you do take them out of their game at all, they can't seem to get back onto it. And so one of my concerns is against Valencia this weekend is Villarreal, trash them, awesome. Athletic Club, trash them, awesome. Then they get punched in the mouth a little bit by Bayern Munich. So how will they respond against Valencia? And how will they respond in the Liga throughout the rest of, for the next 3 weeks until the World Cup break? And then coming back from the World Cup, when hopefully everybody's healthy, what is that going to look like? In theory, that should be the best team on paper in the Europa League, but we know it won't be.
But no, I agree. But going back a little bit to this game and Dembele and whatnot, and I think again I go back to Xavi. I think that he just got it entirely wrong, because Dembele was wreaking havoc on that right flank. He was literally running circles around Alphonso Davies in the buildup. Yes, his end product wasn't great, which is more often than not. But I thought specifically against Bayern, it was down to tactics and the players and the way Xavi chose to play. Because when Dembele, because he did get past Alphonso Davies almost every time that he wanted, then Lewandowski wasn't an option, because both Upamecano and De Ligt were literally on top of Lewandowski. So that, if Lewandowski is gonna quote unquote take out the two center backs, that leaves quote unquote an open space near Masraoui. And we weren't playing with a true winger, because Pedri's not a true winger. So Dembele, that pass to that left winger wasn't there, because Pedri either was there and is obviously not comfortable in that role, or was in the middle. So Dembele had no outlet to that left flank if it wasn't Balde just going forward all the way.
I actually think it's more important. I actually do think it's more important to pull out the left center back for Lewandowski, because that near post run is the one that Lewandowski wants to make. And if Kessié, and again, I think the continuity and consistency was a major problem, because Dembele and Kessié have not really seen the field much together. Same thing with Bellerin overlapping. Like, what made Barca successful against Athletic Club and Villarreal was that Sergio Roberto, cannot believe we're saying that we miss Sergio Roberto, but his runs either inside or overlapping Dembele. Now, you have a whole different problem because, again, it's Sadio Mane instead of whoever Athletic Club was throwing out there, whoever Villarreal was throwing out there, right? Like, that's a totally different ball game. So Sergio Roberto was probably going to have to stay at home more if he had started instead of Bellerin. But because you weren't getting those overlapping runs timed properly, because there was nothing coming inside, and because I can't believe I'm saying this too, but there was something about those tactical fouls, or there was something that was missing from that game in the midfield. And it felt like Gabi, which is weird to say, but it felt like Gabi was kind of missing from that right interior spot. And even Gabi against Athletic Club was much better at making those runs in behind before he went out of the game. But I'm sorry, I'm thinking of Villarreal. But his runs in behind Villarreal's defense was something we wanted from Gabi, and he did, and Villarreal were completely unlocked. So again, I don't know if Gabi does that against Bayern Munich, but that run in that half space in front of Dembele, or that overlapping run from the fullback, like, that has to happen. Because you have to, like, that is what pulls that other center back out. Because again, continuing to try to move horizontally is important. But when you have De Jong and Busquets and neither are making any runs and you're playing at 4-2-3-1, like, that's not going to work.
No, I do agree with that. There were a lot of bad things in this game tactically. Like, I'm not saying this is like the reason. Like, I agree with everything you said about the fullbacks overlapping or underneath and whatnot. But to me, that's one of the things that I don't like when managers do this. Like, oh, let's play a midfielder as a winger. Like, even when we did it with Iniesta, I never liked it, because more often than not, Iniesta wasn't there, like, for Messi, to that famous Messi through ball to the left winger, which we did perfectly when we bought Neymar after that. So. And then before that, we had David Villa. And I never liked that, because it's obvious. It's a midfielder that's not used to playing in that role. And whether he's there and is not used to those runs and whatnot, or he just drops back to the middle, that player, Messi in the heyday and Dembele on Wednesday, when he's going in, he goes past Alphonso Davies, which is hard enough to do. And when he's going in, and Lewandowski is surrounded by 2 or 3 Bayern players, he doesn't have that outlet to just, like, execute that through ball, because there's literally nobody there. So to me, again, it's just like we wasted, in my opinion, an amazing Dembele performance just going by people. Obviously, his end product wasn't good, but just going by people, like, to me, I want to emphasize on this, because I trashed Dembele a lot of times because of his end product and whatnot, and losing stupid balls, passes. So when he plays amazing, which I think he did against freaking Alphonso Davies, like, it wasn't against a scrub, it was against Alphonso Davies, arguably you could say the best left back in the world. Then it was frustrating, because it was a missed opportunity to do damage to Bayern. And it's no coincidence, in my opinion. I know we were down 0-2 and whatnot, but when Xavi basically decided to be brave after minute 60, took out Busquets, he had a yellow card, but took out Busquets, brought in Rafinha, brought in Ferran, and we were just, like, going forward, attacking. We seemed more, like, dangerous and whatnot. Well, obviously, we didn't even have a shot on target, but, like, that sensation of, like, now we're, like, trying to, like, it's like a boxing fight. Let's go. I don't care if you knock me out, but I'm going to go down swinging. During the first 60 minutes, we weren't swinging whatsoever. We were just like, oh, my God, just covering our faces. So that's why it was just so frustrating, because I know we might not be able to hang with the top teams more often than not, but I know what we did in Germany and what we saw at the Camp Nou. It was like there's got to be an in-between both games. Like, we aren't what we were in Germany more often than not. I agree. But again, we aren't what we showed at the Camp Nou. That's why it's frustrating.
I mean, I think there was a bit of an admittance that, having watched the Inter Milan match together at the stadium prior to that, they were pretty bummed. Like that team was pretty down in the dumps, and to ask them to go out against a Bayern Munich team that is almost excited to play against Barcelona, it was a recipe for disaster in that way. So, all right, I think we're going to continue to ask a lot of big questions of this team. We have Valencia coming up. Barcelona has Valencia coming up on the weekend. So that'll be an interesting test because Valencia is very much the Jekyll and Hyde. You never know what you're going to get from Valencia. As always, they're a team that you want to talk about poorly financed or poorly figured out things in the back office for sure. So, Rafa, again, I think I've had enough coughing fits. I think the people here have seen enough disjointed content for one day. So we're going to wrap it up. Remember, follow him, Aldamuy Football, everywhere you get any piece of content, especially in Espanol, of course. So then we are the Barcelona Podcast or the Barcelona Pod or at Hilton D13 for me. Anywhere, again, in the show notes, you can follow us both on all the different platforms, including YouTube and Facebook, Patreon, So merch store as well. We haven't had as many people heading to the merch store, but not to say that this is the perfect time you want Barca content, but I will tell you that the Barcelona Podcast merch, we're still going strong, as well as much as the team can seem to suffer. So that'll wrap it up. Another edition of the show. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Forza Barca.